Hey everyone, this is beinsuretalks, insurance and insurtech insights. Today we'll be talking about how the very tools businesses use to accelerate growth cloud networks and artificial intelligence are inadvertently creating an entirely new landscape of catastrophic systemic cyber risk.
Yeah, it's a massive shift in the environment right now.
Completely. And look, if you are managing risk, leading a team, or, just trying to keep your company's digital doors open, you really need to hear this. We're synthesizing some major eye-opening reports today from QBE, Control Risks, and Beinsure.
Right, and our mission for this deep dive is just to skip the fluff.
Exactly. We are going to directly expose where modern supply chain vulnerabilities actually lie, how hackers are evolving right this second, and the specific non-negotiable steps you absolutely must take to build unbreakable cyber resilience.
Because, I mean, the digital environment has shifted dramatically, right? The old playbooks, they just don't work anymore. We're currently seeing over 600 million cyber attacks occurring daily.
600 million daily. That's just
It's staggering. But it isn't even just the sheer volume of attacks that should concern you. It's the architecture of how we actually do business now. That architecture has, well, it's completely changed the blast radius of those attacks.
right. So let's start by looking at where your data actually lives today, because that physical reality is really the foundation of why modern attacks are so devastating.
Exactly.
According to the Beinsure research, by 2025, global data storage is projected to reach 200 zettabytes. Now, 200 zettabytes sounds like a totally made-up sci-fi number.
Yeah, it's hard to even picture what that means.
Right. To put that in perspective, if 1 gigabyte of data were like a single brick, 200 zettabytes would give us enough bits to build the Great Wall of China, stretching all the way to the moon and back, several times over.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that really paints a picture.
It's an almost incomprehensible volume of information covering IT systems, utilities, data centers, all your connected devices. But here's the kicker. About 50% of that data will sit in the cloud. That is up from just 10% back in 2015.
And, that migration is only accelerating. The global cloud computing market is expected to exceed $5 trillion by 2034.
5 trillion, up from what, around 912 billion in 2025.
Right. But this massive consolidation, it creates this structural vulnerability.
Yeah.
As more organizations transfer their infrastructure and data to these centralized servers, those servers become unprecedented high-value targets.
Because it's all in one place.
Exactly. Just to
Yeah.
put a metric on that reality, high-severity cloud alerts jumped by 235% in 2024 alone.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's like we've taken all our valuables from a million separate, small home safes, and we've put them into one colossal interconnected glass vault.
Right, a giant vault.
Yes, the vault security is top tier, way better than the home safe, but if the glass cracks, everyone goes broke at the exact same time. But I have to ask, if these defensive tools and cloud platforms are so advanced, why are they becoming systemic risks themselves?
Well, it comes down to the paradox of scale. Your defensive tools become systemic risks precisely because of how deeply interconnected they are. We've essentially created a digital monoculture.
A monoculture, like in farming.
Yeah, exactly. In biology, if every farmer plants the exact same genetic crop, one specific blight can just wipe out the entire food supply. In technology, when something breaks across a massive shared network, the failure cascades instantly.
Right, and attackers know this.
Oh, they absolutely understand this. They follow value and they follow concentration. They know that operational downtime and systemic failure are now the primary drivers of financial damage, far more than traditional data theft.
Which brings us to the absolute nightmare scenario of that monoculture, the CrowdStrike outage in 2024. That event disrupted 8.5 million Windows devices globally.
Exactly. And the mechanics of why that happened are so crucial to understand. CrowdStrike provides top-tier endpoint security. I mean, it is literally a tool designed to keep systems safe.
Right, they're the good guys.
Right. But because it needs deep access to actually detect threats, it operates at the kernel level of the operating system.
Like the very core of the machine.
Exactly. So when a flawed update was pushed out, it didn't just crash an app on the desktop. It crashed the core of all those machines at once.
And the financial impact was staggering. It cost Fortune 500 companies an estimated $5.4 billion.
And remember, that wasn't even a malicious attack by a threat actor.
Right. But it perfectly illustrates the operational risk of our current architecture. A defensive tool failed at scale, and the world just stopped. Planes couldn't fly, hospitals couldn't get patient records, financial markets stuttered.
Which highlights a really critical shift in these reports. Operational downtime is becoming exponentially more expensive than the ransoms themselves.
The 2019 Baltimore ransomware attack is the perfect case study here. Beinsure noted they were targeted by the Robinhood ransomware variant. And the attackers didn't just, steal data. They deployed malicious software that systematically encrypted the city's essential servers.
Right, and the mechanism of that encryption is what causes the true damage.
Mhm.
Ransomware like Robinhood doesn't just hit one computer.
No, it spreads.
Yeah, it infiltrates the network, it maps out exactly where the most critical assets are located, and then it detonates across the entire system simultaneously. In Baltimore, that meant the Real Estate Accounting and Services Division, which housed systems for tax collection and water bills, was just completely locked.
The screens literally went black.
Literally black.
And the outcome of that is the ultimate cautionary tale. The city refused to pay the ransom, which, is generally what law enforcement
I
recommends.
didn't want to fund them.
But because their essential servers were locked up and they couldn't quickly restore from backups, the city had to revert to manual paper processes.
Which is incredibly slow.
Exactly. So the total cost of the operational downtime, the lost revenue, and the agonizingly slow rebuild far exceeded the initial $76,000 requested by the hackers. It ended up costing the city over $18 million. It's just devastating. But this is the reality of the cloud era. Because your data is concentrated, and because you're entirely reliant on third-party vendors to host, access, and secure it, you no longer fully control your own uptime.
So wait, if a massive Fortune 500 company has, like, millions to spend on an elite internal IT team, does that even matter if the breach doesn't happen in their building? Because it sounds like the supply chain is the actual front line now.
That is the exact vulnerability. What's fascinating here is how risk clusters beneath the surface. You might secure your own perimeter perfectly, but if you outsource your HR software, your payroll, your customer database,
Then your perimeter just expanded.
right, your perimeter now extends to all of those vendors. A report from BitSite called Under the Surface lays out a really blunt picture. Service providers operate supply chains that are roughly 2.5 times larger than the customers they support.
Meaning, if I have a dozen vendors I rely on, my vendor relies on dozens more that I don't even know exist? Precisely. You are inheriting the risk of your vendor's vendor. That scale expands the attack surface incredibly fast. And the BitSite data shows a really disturbing trend.
Which is?
These service providers actually struggle more than their consumer clients to keep defenses tight. They have to connect their software to hundreds of different corporate architectures, which creates hundreds of potential entry points.
And attackers are completely capitalizing on this. They no longer want to hack one company at a time. That's way too slow. They want gateways to multiples of victims.
Exactly.
The 2023 Okta breach is terrifying when you look at how it actually worked. For those who don't know, Okta is a single sign-on provider. It's essentially the master skeleton key for a company. Employees log into Okta once, and it authenticates them into all their other work apps.
And that is exactly why it is such a massive target. If threat actors can compromise a single sign-on provider, they don't even have to break into your network.
They just log in.
Right. They just log in as an authorized user.
Yep.
In the 2023 incident, attackers breached Okta's support system. That single point of failure exposed 134 business clients who trusted Okta.
And it wiped roughly $2 billion from Okta's market value almost overnight. One supplier failed, and hundreds of entirely separate businesses paid the price.
Yeah.
So if I'm a business leader listening to this, I just need to vet my top 3 or 4 software vendors really well, right? Problem solved.
That's exactly the trap most companies fall into. It's not just the big names you know. In several industries, vendors serving less than 1% of firms actually control more than 50% of the total market share when measured by client revenue.
Wow.
Yeah, the report calls them the critical 99.
The invisible load-bearing beams of the global economy.
That is exactly what they are. The top 99 providers globally by market share operate completely out of sight. They might provide an obscure open-source code library, or specialized routing software, or a back-end billing API.
But none of them are low impact.
Not at all.
Yeah.
A single point of failure in one of these outsourced providers can halt business operations across entire sectors of the economy simultaneously.
And we really have to inject the geopolitical reality into the supply chain discussion because the Beinsure report brings up a really sobering statistic.
It does.
About 33% of U.S. organizations rely on companies listed by the U.S. Department of Defense as Chinese military companies. Now, impartially speaking, regardless of where you sit politically, purely from a risk management perspective, discovering that a state-affiliated entity is deeply embedded in your software stack is a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Knowing exactly who sits inside your supply chain isn't optional anymore. It's basic risk hygiene.
The geopolitical climate just adds severe volatility. State-sponsored actors, cybercrime syndicates, decentralized hacktivist groups, they're all fueling this landscape. When you rely on a complex global supply chain, you're inherently absorbing international friction.
Right.
Each outsourced provider that connects into your company creates an additional layer of risk, not just for like malware transmission, but for critical dependencies that could be severed by international sanctions or trade disputes.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We have highly concentrated data in the cloud, we have these fragile, interconnected supply chains, and now we introduce generative AI to the mix.
Yeah, the ultimate accelerator.
It feels like we are giving a lockpick an industrial drill. The exact same Gen AI tools making your employees more productive are giving attackers unprecedented speed and precision.
The speed of adoption is unlike anything we've seen in the history of technology. ChatGPT reached 755 million users in early 2025.
That's insane.
It was a 33% jump just between December 2024 and February 2025. Microsoft Copilot reported 88 million users. Today, about 70% of organizations deploy AI in at least one business function, which is up from 55% a year earlier. And 20 to 40% of employees are using AI daily, particularly in programming and content creation.
But the threat actors are using it too. How exactly are they weaponizing Gen AI? Because, I mean, it's not just about writing better phishing emails with correct grammar, is it?
No, it goes far beyond grammar. AI fundamentally lowers the barrier to entry for complex cybercrime. The tools are neutral, but the outcomes are definitely not.
Right.
Previously, deploying a sophisticated multi-stage attack required a really high level of coding expertise. Now, threat actors are using Gen AI to write polymorphic malware.
Polymorphic meaning it changes.
Exactly. It's malware that constantly rewrites its own code to evade signature-based antivirus software. Businesses are facing a rise in attacks from groups that were previously dismissed as too technically incompetent. AI empowers them to operate at an elite level.
And the deepfake fraud mechanism is just wild. We aren't talking about grainy, easily detectable videos anymore.
Not at all. AI allows attackers to synthesize a perfect clone of a CEO's voice using just a 3-minute clip they found on, like, a corporate YouTube channel.
Just 3 minutes of audio.
That's all it takes. They can then use that cloned voice in a live, real-time Zoom call with a finance employee to urgently authorize a wire transfer.
Oh, man.
It completely bypasses traditional email filters and firewalls because it exploits human trust using perfect digital mimicry.
The financial impact of that specific mechanism is terrifying. The typical loss from a deepfake fraud incident has surged from around $250,000 to over $20 million per incident.
Yeah.
That is an entirely different stratosphere of risk.
And this AI-driven efficiency is causing a massive acceleration in ransomware activity across the board. Let's look at the projections for ransomware victims whose stolen data is published on public leak sites, which, attackers use to extort victims.
It's a double extortion tactic.
Right. In 2020, there were 1,412 victims on those sites. By 2024, it was 5,010. By 2025, it's expected to hit 6,000, and by the end of 2026, over 7,000.
That is a 5-fold increase.
It's exponential.
And who is getting hit the hardest? The global data shows government and administrative bodies represent 19% of all incidents between August 2023 and August 2025.
Which makes sense.
IT and telecommunications follow closely at 18%. Then manufacturing, logistics, and transport at 13%.
This perfectly illustrates the convergence of everything we've discussed today. Attackers are chasing scale and dependency. They hit governments because the services are essential, like we saw in Baltimore, meaning the pressure to pay the ransom to restore critical infrastructure is immense.
They literally can't afford the downtime.
Exactly. And they hit IT and telecom because those are the critical 99 load-bearing beams. If you compromise a telecom provider, you gain access to the data streams of thousands of their corporate clients.
So if I am a business leader listening to this right now, with AI accelerating attacks on fragile supply chains and companies facing devastating financial losses from operational downtime, the obvious question is, how does insurance play into this?
Yeah, the insurance piece is critical.
Can I just buy a policy to make the risk go away? Just transfer the risk to a carrier and sleep well at night?
In short, no. The days when a county or a company could merely answer a few questions on a generic form to receive cyber insurance are completely gone.
Right.
You can't just buy fire insurance while your house is actively burning. The insurance industry is under immense existential pressure right now. To understand why, you really have to look at the loss ratio. The cyber insurance loss ratio in the U.S. jumped from 44.6% in 2019 to 73% in 2024.
Just to clarify the mechanics of that for the listener, a 73% loss ratio means that for every dollar the insurance company takes in from premiums, they are bleeding out 73 cents just to cover cyber claims and ransoms.
Right.
Once you factor in their own operating costs and overhead, they are basically left with zero margin.
Precisely. They are underwater. Ransomware now accounts for roughly 75% of those claims. Back in the 2015 to 2017 period, annual insured losses were under $100 million. Now, they're sitting between $4 billion and $6 billion annually.
Which naturally forces a massive underwriting shift. They can't afford to just take someone's word that their network is secure anymore.
Insurance carriers now require an in-depth, bottom-up understanding of a company's actual security practices and protocols. We are talking about invasive audits.
They want to look under the hood.
Oh, they want to take the engine apart. They want to see your network segmentation, your privileged access management, the results of your recent penetration testing. Insurance is no longer just a financial band-aid you can buy to ignore the problem.
Right.
Insurers are actively forcing companies to improve their real-world security posture before they will even write the policy.
And yet, according to the Aon report mentioned in our sources, only 30% of surveyed organizations actually hold cyber insurance. That leaves a massive portion of the economy totally exposed to avoidable financial losses. I imagine many companies just can't pass the new rigorous audits to qualify.
It's highly likely.
Though, ironically, global competition in the cyber insurance sector has increased, and pricing for U.S.-based risks actually declined for the 10th consecutive quarter as new capital enters the market.
It's a complex, evolving market. And this brings up a really difficult ethical adjacent dilemma regarding ransomware payments that regulators are wrestling with right now.
The whole to pay or not to pay debate.
Exactly. From a pure business continuity standpoint, many victims find it easier and less costly to just pay the ransom than to endure the prolonged business interruption. Again, think of Baltimore. But paying creates a vicious cycle. Every ransom paid funds the research and development of the next generation of AI-driven malware. It actively incentivizes criminals to keep attacking.
Right, so a natural reaction for governments is to say, let's just ban ransom payments altogether, cut off the funding.
But this raises an incredibly important question about unintended consequences. The reports note that a total hardline ban could mean that the organizations most in need of protection, like small hospitals or regional supply chains, without the resources to recover their systems independently, are left fatally exposed to an attack.
Because they can't legally buy the decryption key.
Exactly. If they can't pay to unlock their systems, they go bankrupt and vital services halt permanently. The Geneva Association put out a report highlighting that private insurers and governments really must work together here.
It has to be a joint effort.
It does. They have to jointly boost society's resilience through shared threat intelligence and robust recovery frameworks so we can actually realize the benefits of digitalization without being continuously held hostage.
Okay, we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem today. We know the sheer scale of cloud concentration, the deep hidden fragility of the supply chain, how AI is acting as a threat accelerator, and this incredibly strict new insurance landscape.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is. But if you're a director, a board member, or a business leader listening to this, knowing the problem isn't enough. You need a playbook. We need to transition to the cure. And I don't mean basic advice like use multi-factor authentication. What is the high-level master plan for cyber resilience in this new environment?
The very first thing that has to happen is a core philosophy shift at the board level. Resilience now depends entirely on preparation rather than recovery.
Prep over recovery.
Exactly. If you are waiting until you are attacked to figure out your incident response, you've already lost. Because AI attacks happen in seconds, human-led response times are obsolete. Understanding your constantly changing risk profile is the single most important key to making better decisions.
Okay, let's lay out the exact steps from the reports. What is the step-by-step implementation plan that directors need to execute right now?
Step 1. You must embed cyber risk management into your technology life cycles from the very beginning. This is what we call shifting left in the development cycle.
Meaning do it earlier in the process.
Right. Security cannot be a patch applied after the software is deployed. It has to be built into the foundational architecture of everything your company builds or buys.
Okay, step 2.
Establish continuous monitoring and threat intelligence using a zero-trust framework. Because we know AI is helping attackers slip past traditional perimeter defenses, you must operate under the assumption that a breach has already occurred.
Assume they are already inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need systems that are actively looking for anomalies inside your network, treating every internal user and every device as potentially hostile until their behavior proves otherwise.
But even with zero trust, an AI-powered attack is going to find a crack eventually. When that breach happens, what's the play? Because, like you said, calling the IT guy at 2 in the morning seems a little antiquated now.
Which brings us to step 3. Build strict automated incident response and business continuity plans. The goal is to detect and contain threats at machine speed.
Automated containment.
Right. Isolating compromised servers before the infection can escalate to widespread operational downtime. Remember, downtime, not just data theft, is where the real financial hemorrhage happens.
But a great internal response plan is useless if the breach didn't happen in your building. How do we police the vendors? That leads into step 4, right?
Exactly. Step 4 is rigorously evaluating the security posture of your third-party providers. You can't just trust that they have it handled because they are a big, recognizable name.
Or part of the critical 99.
Right. You need to demand proof of their security audits, understand their incident response times, and map out exactly how their software interacts with your core data.
Which brings us to the final step, managing the blast radius.
Step 5. Establish clear, uncompromising protocols for managing supply chain exposure. You need to know exactly who is in your network, what privileges they have, and you must segment those access points.
So if they get hit, it doesn't take you down.
Exactly. If a third-party billing vendor gets compromised, they should not have a pathway to your core proprietary database. You must architect your systems so that when a vendor fails tomorrow, your critical operations just keep running.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. Just to quickly recap our journey today, we looked at the sheer mathematical danger of cloud concentration, where a single bad update can shut down Fortune 500s. We uncovered the hidden systemic risks clustering in our supply chains and the quiet danger of the critical 99.
Right.
We broke down how generative AI is acting as an industrial drill for hackers, turning low-skill actors into dangerous threats and bypassing human trust. And finally, we laid out the mandate from the insurance industry to shift from reactive recovery to proactive, machine speed preparation.
The digital exposure is only going to grow. The exact tools that lift our productivity and streamline our supply chains are the same tools testing our defenses. Aggressive architectural preparation really is the only path forward.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If generative AI is currently making human hackers exponentially faster and more persuasive, what happens when fully autonomous AI agents start probing, learning, and attacking networks entirely on their own 24 hours a day? Are we rapidly approaching a reality where corporate cybersecurity is no longer humans fighting humans, but just machines fighting machines in the dark?
Thanks for diving into this complex landscape with us.
Stay safe out there. See you next time.